the room.
I am the loudest speaker in the room. What am I going to do? All right, Brian.
Okay, what's going on with
What's
Tommy?
going on with Tommy?
Okay. Things got hotted up again about 3 or 4 weeks ago. There was a trial in London of a man accused of what we can probably call a terrorist act, because he drove a white van, and I can say all of this now because he was found guilty. Okay, the British laws on talking about trials are very different while the trial is ongoing and after the trial.
I mean, the police don't leak every single thing about the investigation like in Israel?
It's totally different from Israel, where you're all guilty and the police files are all there on the newspapers.
Right.
Except never the defence, only the prosecution.
Right, the defence has to shut up, yeah, crazy.
No. So in England, you can't talk about a trial that's ongoing in broad... There are very, very specific rules. So this trial started up, this man called Darren Osborne, who was accused and then found guilty of driving a van into a crowd of Muslims outside a mosque. And one of the men that he drove into had collapsed earlier, probably for a heart complaint, but then this guy hit him and killed him. And it was decided in the trial, just tell you how the story ends, basically. A number of people were injured. This one man died who had already collapsed, but the trial established beyond a reasonable doubt that he was dead because he was hit by a car, by a van, not dead from a heart attack or anything. He was not dead before this guy.
Okay.
So this was a murder trial. It was a murder case, and the guy was convicted of murder and sentenced to actually a very, very long sentence. But at the very start of the trial, on the first day, when the prosecution opens up and says it starts to lay out its case, one of the first things that they said was that this man had suddenly, 4 weeks before doing this act, become radicalized. So they were trying to paint this case in an analogous way to when a Muslim becomes radicalized and suddenly starts killing people, blowing school children up in Manchester or any of the other acts that Britain had seen, because this actually happened following 3 major terrorist attacks in London and Manchester. Over a 6-week period, there were 3. There's a car going over the Westminster Bridge, there was another one on London Bridge, and then there was the blowing up of the concert in Manchester.
Okay.
All happened right before this guy got radicalised. And at the trial they mentioned 2 names. One was Tommy Robinson, one was Jada Franson. Jada Franson is somewhat notorious because she is the leader of a group called Britain First, and Donald Trump retweeted her 3 tweets famously.
She became very famous at the time, yes.
And Piers Morgan extracted a kind of sort of Trump-esque apology for that in an interview in Davos. Sort of Trump.
Really?
What Trump actually said was, if you are telling me she's a horrible racist, then I will say that it wasn't so great.
Interesting.
But there was what's called a performative, which is the if you are telling me.
Interesting.
So Trump didn't say I apologise. He said, if it's correct what you're telling me that she's a horrible racist, then I'll apologise. Minor detail. Anyway, she was mentioned at the trial as having sent direct messages to this man, and Tommy was mentioned as having sent direct messages to this man. And the very, very first reporting from inside the trial was a few tweets from a journalist for The Independent, which then got put on The Independent as a live blog. And the first headlines about this ongoing trial that went all around the world was, Darren Osborne receives direct messages from Tommy Robinson and Jada Franson, from far-right leaders. That's what they call it.
And what is the purpose of this line? In order then to put Tommy and Jada on trial for being responsible for radicalizing this man and his actions?
That's a very good question. We don't know yet. And the problem with what happened was then, a few hours later, in the court, and I'll say something about how this happened. In the court, the officers of the court or the judge took some of the press aside, and again, it's not clear if this happened in front of the jury, and said, no, we just need to make a clarification here. All that we found on Darren Osborne's computers or iPads or iPhones or whatever it was a screenshot of 2 emails from The Rebel, which is the company that Tommy works for. And I know that those emails are largely crafted in Canada by the staff of The Rebel. Whereas Tommy actually does type his own tweets, those emails are largely composed by the office, and they go to more than 1 million people are on that Rebel mailing list.
Wait a second. You're trying to tell me that the direct communication proven between Tommy
Correct.
and this convicted man are emails from a subscription list sent out to more than 1 million people?
Correct. I'm one of them. And not only that, one was calling for a silent march, again following this Manchester terrorist attack, and the other was highlighting another one of the campaigns. I'm not even sure it was even Islam related, but that was the extent of the direct communications. So it was not direct, it was not on social media. You can't name Tommy Robinson. I mean, it's like a brand name at that point. And so...
Wait, but yet the official reports have been using the terminology direct communication?
Correct. And Tommy Robinson's got dozens of screenshots of newspapers who then changed the story later, but the damage is done in that first 3 hours. And I know that behind the scenes, the only reason why the court issued the clarification was because Tommy's barrister phoned...
That's a lawyer for all of us non-British.
That's a fancy name. That's the fanciest sort of lawyer you can have in the UK. And very, very few people in Britain... I'm struggling to know if I know of anybody else who has a barrister on speed dial, as Tommy has to.
Okay.
Tommy's barrister called up the Attorney General of the UK, which is the highest legal office in the land, and said, you better make some changes here. And that happened within 3 hours.
Otherwise, what are the consequences?
Well, because the consequences of leaving that out there are grave. Now, they're still grave, and Tommy's barrister and Tommy are waiting to see the court transcripts. He wants to know exactly what the prosecution said at the start of the trial and what the media said as a result of what the prosecution said. At the moment, we've only got media accounts because there is no... In England, they don't broadcast court. They don't even record. You can't get a recording of what went on in a court.
But there are transcripts of the transcriber in the court case.
And again, Tommy has to pay a few £1,000s to get those. They're not public, easily. Right. The whole system is rigged. And so that set off an avalanche of media, not about Darren Osborne, this guy who clearly was unhinged or became unhinged or whatever it was, because I can show you dozens, probably 50 videos where Tommy Robinson says nobody should ever go and attack innocent Muslims because you don't like Islam and its teachings. That is not the thing to do. He's very clear on it. I've been listening to him say that for years. He said it for years, forever, because he knows that's true. He knows that many Muslims are victims of Islam. That's the same as... That's the ideology is the problem, and you don't beat the ideology by murdering innocent Muslims. That's not how it works. That's not how our enlightened liberal side is ever going to achieve any kind of success in beating those ideas back. So he says all that, but suddenly it's as if he's on trial. And he went on... he then did... And this got really fun, and you've shared some of these videos to your platform. He went out. He was given a request for an interview by Sky News and the BBC, which is basically the biggest. But Tommy does not do video interviews without filming them himself, and he not only filmed them this time, he live streamed them, and that can be a bit complicated because of these rules regarding. Reporting of a court case as it's in progress. But I don't believe that Tommy strayed outside the bounds of what's permissible in what he did. And what he did expose, it's like a 50-minute video with the BBC journalist and a 25-minute video with the Sky journalist. He exposed their agenda. And the agenda was so clearly, how can we pin this on Tommy Robinson? They don't want to talk about what influence the acts of terrorism, multiple acts of terrorism, multiple murdered people in the UK, what influence that had on the mind of Darren Osborne.
The terrorism at the hands of
Correct.
by the hands of Muslims in Britain.
In the same statement where they blamed Tommy at the beginning of the trial, this man's wife said he actually became really animated after watching a BBC documentary called Three Girls, which was about the 25-year rape gang scandal in the north of England, and in fact all over England. He saw that, but the headlines that went out said Tommy Robinson, not BBC documentary. That was mentioned in the text, but it's way down. It's better to put Tommy in the headline.
Right.
So I think that this whole thing of looking for causes of radicalization is a misnomer anyway.
Well, I'm going to take you there in a second, but the other thing that he exposed in those interviews that he videoed, at least in the BBC one, that's the video I saw, was the BBC journalist admitting that the BBC does not, on purpose, does not report the terror acts and blame dealing with what's taking place in the Muslim community in Britain at all.
Yeah.
In order to avoid it.
So this came out in the BBC interview, and it was a particularly fine detail. Darren Osborne, as he said to the court, and he wrote down, his first target was not actually a mosque in Finsbury Park, which is where he ended up making his attack.
Yeah.
His first target was the Al-Quds Day March. The Al-Quds Day March, and this is really appropriate to an Israel-focused crowd. The Al-Quds Day March is an anti-Israel march, sponsored for something like 20 years by Iran. It is Iran's Shiite cause. They call it Al-Quds Day. They fly the flags of Hezbollah, which, owing to a bizarre legal loophole in the UK, are not considered to be a terrorist organization.
Right, because they like to say, oh, it's the political side, not the military side. And anyone familiar with the Hezbollah knows there is only one side of the Hezbollah.
And Hezbollah, by the way, is a word. You know where it comes from. It's actually a phrase from the Koran. It means party of God.
Right.
Hizballah. In fact, I like to spell it not with the O-L. I like to spell it apostrophe Allah, because that's Allah, the name, Hizballah. The name at the end is Allah. It is for.
They want to kill Jews. They want to destroy Israel in the name of Allah, basically. Yeah.
So that march he couldn't get to. Now that march is not publicised. Now
who couldn't get to?
Darren Osborne could not drive his truck.
His initial target was the march, and he couldn't get to there.
It was well protected by the police, and so the Muslims were saved from being run over by this madman. And at that march last year, there was a big counter-protest actually organised by Jewish groups. Stand With Us, the various British Jewish groups organised a counter-rally, had speakers. They had my friend Kay Wilson spoke beautifully. You can find her speech online. But the point is, nobody from the mainstream media was there at the march or the counter-march.
Like total blackout. Total blackout
Doesn't
on
appear
this
on the
event.
BBC. You won't find it. You might find a small report.
Blatantly anti-Israel event in the streets of London for 20 years, and the media disregards it.
And the Al-Quds marchers are shouting, Khaybar, Khaybar, al-Yahud. They're saying, Jews remember Khaybar, which was an attack where Jews were killed, or thrown off their land. But that was the same song that they were singing on the Mavai Marmara, the ship, where they beat the soldiers who landed with paintball guns.
Hey, Joanna's watching. She said she was at the pro-Israel demonstration at the Al-Quds March. Awesome to you, Joanna.
Yeah. Well, that march, nobody heard of. But guess who did publicise the march with tweets and so forth? Tommy Robinson. So the BBC journalist tries to say, well, he wouldn't have known about that march to go and attack it if you hadn't told people. And Tommy's like,
isn't that your job?
That's your job. And then the guy says, well, we don't want to inflame things. What? And for 25 years they didn't report on rape gangs because they didn't want to inflame things.
And it grew.
And the police didn't want to prosecute, and the child services didn't want to, because they were scared of being called racists, because it turns out that most of the men doing it were brown, and so they think race. actually, it's ideological. It's
Part of a culture.
It's part of a culture. And all of these things are swept under the rug. And then the guy they want to blame is Tommy Robinson.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I see an extremely sad irony in all this.
Yeah.
Okay? I want to go into this. Here they are trying to make a legal case connecting Tommy Robinson to radicalizing an individual,
Yeah.
and yet the British media for decades is ignoring the radicalization taking place in the Islamic community in Britain, affecting British lives with terror attacks, killing Britain. And has there ever been a time when they have pointed out the radicalization that imams or other Muslim leaders are responsible for radicalizing Muslims to then do those attacks on British streets against British citizens?
I'll tell you what's worse than that. So Tommy had also one interview on Newsnight, which is the BBC's flagship news programme, 10 o'clock at night on BBC Two. Kirsty Walk, one of the foremost political interviewers, she gave him a vicious interview, real back and forth, and he held his own. And I know, and he wasn't allowed to video this interview. They banned him from taking his cell phone into the studio, and it was a pre-recorded interview. It was not live.
So they could edit
They knew,
it.
so they could edit it. And the one thing that they edited out of it was that she came at him with the accusation. So, because what they wanted from him was, won't you admit that you're a little bit responsible for radicalizing this man? Tommy's answer was, won't you admit that the Koran and the life of Muhammad are responsible for radicalizing jihadi terrorists? They cut that out.
Of course.
They cut that out. And the reason why Darren Osborne is an absolute outlier is because our culture in the West, our background, our upbringing, what we get from our parents, this is Judaism and Christianity together, is not to murder people. And we know what murder is, and we are taught right from wrong. And there is no cause that allows Jews to murder. There's a difference between killing and murder, but that's a different story. But we know what murder is, and we know not to do it. And so the idea of equating radicalization in a sense of Tommy explaining what the reality of Islam is, with Muslims getting radicalized by reading the Quran, which has more than 100 direct instructions to murder infidels. And it's murder because it's telling them you can kill an infidel for blasphemy against the name of their prophet.
Wait, correct me if I'm wrong. I know you're familiar with this stuff, and I'm not as knowledgeable as you are. Isn't there a prayer said?
Well, prayer. Okay.
Isn't there?
There's a contentious thing, but this is not widely and well reported. But I've looked into it at great length with real Arabic scholars, and basically, the farewell address of Muhammad, which forms part of what they call the Shahada, this expression of faith.
Yeah.
You become a Muslim actually just by saying some words. All
Right.
you have to do is wag your finger, say some words, and the words are, which I can say without becoming a Muslim, is I don't like saying. You know what? I'm not.
Don't say it. You have to say it.
But there's a bit that's taken off from the beginning.
Yeah.
The bit that's taken off from the beginning is, I was ordered to fight all men until they say there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. But this bit of I was ordered to fight until they say, it's attributed to Muhammad's farewell address. It doesn't often come out in English translations, but it's there in Arabic in various sources. But I was ordered to fight until they say. And if you look at the behavior of jihad
Right.
for 1400 years,
Yeah.
they're doing that.
100%.
They are fighting until we're all Muslim. And,
Right.
and so it doesn't, you can come with your other interpretations of the Quran and all of that peace and love stuff. Don't tell it to me. Go tell it to the guys in Syria fighting for ISIS, because those are the ones you've got to worry about. And that cause for radicalization
Yeah.
is covered up by the BBC. They don't want it known. They will cover it up. So that's led to interesting couple of weeks in Tommy Land.
Yeah.
People came with death threats, an uptick in his death threats, trying to put his address online. Someone did that, but it was an old address. There's an innocent family with 3 kids living in the house. The police have to go out and stand outside. Some Muslim kid
That's horrible.
put strong death and rape threats against Tommy and his family and his kids. Tommy told the police. Police did nothing. Tommy went to find the guy. Found the guy, waited outside his house. Found the guy at 5 in the morning when he was on his way to the mosque. Turns out this is a kid with mental health issues. Tommy basically, he didn't arrest him, but he got him, talked to him, found that he was quite okay, kind of one-to-one, called the police, instructed the police not to arrest this guy, because this guy was being put up to threaten Tommy by another person.
Wow. Whoa. Dude, that's huge what you just said.
Yeah.
That's huge what you just said, because people should know, and I don't know how many people are familiar. I'm just going to take a tangent here for a second. There are plenty of terror attacks that take place in Israel.
Yeah.
Where they are children or
Subnormal,
teenagers who are mentally disabled, who have mental health issues, who are sent by relatives, friends to do the terror attack. And this is documented. It has happened many more times than one time. And here we're seeing that same pattern.
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
a pattern. This isn't just Israel. You're seeing
No.
that this is something that exists, that's taking place. It is sick.
It is not
It
made
is
up
sick.
far-right radicalization. It is real. Tommy found the guy, called the police, and it's a very difficult situation, because this guy was issuing, he actually even said he was going to eat Tommy's children. I mean, what kind of a person looks into a Facebook Live video and says, I'm going to eat your kids? And clearly the guy is subnormal. Anyway, he was taken away, and he's getting mental health help now on the NHS in Britain. And hopefully someone will watch out for him. And Tommy said to him, why are you doing, what's making you do this? What do they teach you at the mosque? And the guy said, and you can see on this live video that Tommy shot, he was terrified. He said, I'm taught to fear Allah. And there's fear. He was doing, and so they're so impressionable. And this system of control that comes with Islam, the total abjugation of personal responsibility, this shift to this collectivized view, it is the foremost problem of our time as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason it's in our Western societies and growing like this, I think, is because of the far left.
100%. They're right.
They marry
willing
together.
partners.
But the one, it's a horrible situation. Anyway, that's probably enough Tommy for everybody.
Enough Tommy, but we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to go into it. I want to have some very sad laughs with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump from the horrendous situation of Britain, which I call cultural suicide, right? That's basically what Britain and the West or Europe are doing to themselves by partnering and allowing this Islamization to take over their countries, and they're killing their own culture. I want to jump to Justin Trudeau and Canada. Mr. People Kind.
Yeah, you do.
Mr. Let's bring ISIS terrorists back in and integrate them into our country because we are pro-diversity and integration. Mr. I'm not going to give money to veterans, but I will give $10.5 million to a terrorist who killed an American soldier. What is... Wait a second, another one? Mr. I have Muslim socks that I love showing the whole world all the time, which I have no clue what's written on those socks, but it's Arabic of some kind. What is going on here?
Listen,
and we thought Britain is bad.
Britain is bad. Well, look, you surprised. I don't know what more there is to say about Justin Trudeau. He is a comedy clown, but running a large country with an army and all of these other things. And worse than that, he is presiding over the complete demographic ruin of Canada. Because in the background, he's going to have uncontrolled Muslim immigration. He's going to change the nature of Canada forever. It's just whether it can be stopped. And I mean, the comparison back to Harper, who was before him, Stephen Harper, who was a great friend of Israel and seemed from the outside to people like us, you know, a good guy. You get this clown, and I am speechless on it. I've got nothing more to say. I mean, the people kind thing, it just shows a way of thinking. And to try and say he was joking, he wasn't joking.
He wasn't joking. He was totally serious. Watch the video. I mean, it's right there, right in front of for all of us to see.
And
he was not joking. He was damn serious.
Excuse
me, please say people kind.
To a woman, mansplaining. I know.
She laughed. I mean, she was laughing.
I know. Well, all it does actually is just highlight the difference between him and what I consider to be a proper world leader, Trump. And you know, yeah. I'm still there with Trump much more. There was an interesting thing. Perhaps we could talk a little bit.
Go for it.
So there's been an interview in Israel Hayom. I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh, the one with Trump?
Yes.
Boaz,
and it's all a bit...
Israel Hayom is one of Israel's biggest paper now, thank God, because it's more of a center-right paper.
It's at the very... You know, it's central. Okay. I think it's very central. I don't see it strongly right-leaning. There's a big difference.
I actually don't even read it, but I know it's in Hebrew and it is in English, which is also good. And so the editor, Boaz Bismuth, had an interview with President Trump last week.
Now, it was a bit of a rambling, Trump-esque style interview, and we haven't seen a transcript. And Israel Hayom obviously cut it up a little bit. But then Haaretz took what was published in Israel Hayom and just cherry-picked the most bizarre stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
And it's like, it's not even worth going into the detail, but it was just... article, because trying to pluck out, can we find some reversal on his... Can we try and find some harsh words about Israel, about
for those unfamiliar, Haaretz is an Israeli newspaper, which is one of the most anti-Israel rags out there, even though it is written by fellow Israelis, which is a very sad thing.
And what you just see is just such monumentally blatant, agenda-driven reporting, because it's clear the source is the only one source that everybody else has got, which is what's printed in Israel Hayom. But then you just have to see how they spin it, and that they've lost all pretense of being neutral reporting.
Right. And the problem is their English reporting is even worse.
Oh, it's worse
than their Hebrew reporting.
And then even more than that, whilst it has a vanishingly small circulation in Israel, despite giving itself away in all of the hotels and so on, it's like I don't know, it's under 100,000.
Yeah, it's a very very small.
It's very small, and Israelis still read newspapers. They really do. There's a lot of newspapers, but internationally, Haaretz is the only newspaper that gets read. It's the only one that the New York Times
and the English and I have no problem saying some of their reporters report lies. It's not just misinformation; it is outright lies about Israel.
You know, I've caught them on numerous occasions on Israeli Cool. You can find actual
Gidon Levy. I'll say it. Gidon Levy, Amira Hess. Right.
I
two
found
of the
them
major
one time. There was
liars about Israel, and the world picks it up and believes their lies because they're the reputable paper.
There was one good story about Lag BaOmer, and Ryan Bellerose was in Hebron at Lag BaOmer, and Amira Haas wrote this story about them burning Arab olive trees, which none of it happened, but in the translation from the Hebrew, Haaretz English made it worse. And to take an Amira Haas piece
and make it worse.
That's
not easy.
And I had the first-hand testimony of Ryan telling me that did not happen there, that did not happen there. And
it's just so sad.
Anyway, but what you see is you just I have now there's just nothing I believe unless I've got a first-hand source.
I know. You know, from any media source, really.
That's why, just mentioning Tommy again, when Tommy streams live a 50-minute interview with the BBC, and then later you see the 12 seconds that they clip from it, the only way you're going to understand how that 12 seconds came into existence
is if you see the context.
is if you see all 50 minutes.
Right.
And this week, another thing, Tommy, I'm all Tommy, but Tommy was in Germany this week with Rebel, and he's put out 2 videos so far. There's another to come, I think. But he was focusing actually on what the German media were doing. And he went up to the German media.
With regards to what?
He was at a march which goes on every week in Dresden, an anti-Islam.
Oh, it's
march.
growing.
And it's growing.
I've seen
But
coverage.
the German press are there, but they're not covering it, and they don't want to talk to Tommy. And when he asks them questions, one of them, actually calls him a fascist. And then he says, "Why am I a fascist? What's fascist about me?" And then she says, "I don't want to talk to you. I'm calling the police." Huh? Who's the fascist? I mean, you're running to the police to stop a man asking you questions. He's a journalist. You're a journalist. You don't want to answer questions. The whole thing is just surreal. And it's the same. It's exactly the same thing in Germany. The press don't want to report on the growing nature of the resistance to Merkel's unrestrained immigration, Islamization of society.
Did you read the paper or the article last week? I posted it about the German left-wing leader who came out admitting Germany is gone, and it's so bad I'm leaving. Right? She has admitted she was involved in assisting the Muslim migrants in Germany. She's one of the leaders, far left leaders, and she's all of a sudden come to the realization that she herself was part of bringing the destruction to Germany. It can't be saved, and she's leaving Germany.
The only question is how long it will take and how honest these people will get to realize. Look, there's an issue here with what they've done in Europe. The vast influx of people so suddenly, and no attempt, not even an attempt to say a great many aspects of your Islamic culture are problematic and we cannot allow them to go on here. Nobody said that. Right. Nobody has said that. Nobody's got the balls in Europe to say that. I mean, I was having a discussion about Israel specifically with someone behind the scenes to help them understand what Israel is and isn't. Ethno-state, not ethno-state. And I said, we actually have elements of Sharia law that we allow in Israel because we allow the Arab Muslim population to
judge their own. For certain stuff.
Not high criminal stuff. Right. That's totally Israeli law. But for marriages and family issues, we allow them to judge it by Sharia law. And in my heart of hearts, I know that is not good. It totally unfavors women. It's a bad legal system. But
it shows a respect that Israel has with the understanding of reality as well.
We're in a very different situation, which is that to Europe, which is Islam. There's no other way to say it. Islam was deeply rooted here by the time we rebuilt Judaism. We had been gone so long that Islam had moved in by the sword. So the idea that in 70 years, and we're coming up to the 70th anniversary, we can't stamp out the worst aspects of Islam in Israel in 70 years. And I don't know if we're trying but...
No, we're definitely not trying.
We're not trying. So we have to come to some arrangement with it here.
No, because we're lucky in a weird way, and it's a very sad way, okay? Because Israeli society as a whole, and even Jewish society as a whole, or Jewish Israel, does not admit the problems within Muslim culture. And again, I will say it, and Brian says it, we are not against Muslims. There are wonderful Muslims. Okay, this isn't about individual Muslims. This is about an integral problems within Islamic culture. Yeah. All right, let's just put it.
The ideology.
And the ideology
that flows into that culture, that drives that culture.
Right. So I was saying, just to finish my point, and I'll go in. So Israeli society and Jewish society still do not recognize these problems within Islamic culture. But what we're lucky, it's a sad lucky, because we are in an existential threat against the Arab Muslim world, we are defending ourselves against their terror, even though Israel/Jewish society does not connect the dots and connect it to the problems within Muslim culture, as opposed to the rest of the Western world that does not have this existential threat yet. Yeah. And therefore, they're not even defending themselves on the basic for their lives, which we do. Yeah. And they're not connecting the dots to the problem of the Muslim culture. So we're at least. It's a
well. I would like to see Israel more. Look, we've gone through we've never stopped looking for peace. We've never stopped looking for a peace deal with these people. With the, with the Arab nations, we've come to a sort of a détente. Egypt and Jordan are the best examples. But with the Palestinians,
it's a hudna. Anything with the Muslim world is a hudna. Anyone unfamiliar, a hudna is a temporary peace.
It's
Islam
truce. It's
is a
more
truce,
of a
right?
ceasefire
And again, I'm reliant on a professor, Mordechai Kedar. He understands Islam much more than me. He says Islam does not believe in a full peace. There is no word of peace with non-Muslims. It is about a truce. To then until the Muslim world is strong enough to then beat their enemies. So there never can be a full peace with the Muslim world.
It has a 10-year review clause. I mean, if you're in Britain, it's a lease with a 10-year renewal. Every 10 years you got to check the situation, see if you're strong enough to attack. That can be what this Iran thing was with the drone. You have to poke them to see the various strengths, to see if you're strong enough yet. And the rules that Muhammad laid down for his people, and they're quite clearly there in the Hadith and in the Quran, are check to see if you're strong enough. If you're not strong enough, don't attack. You can be quiet.
Yeah, and we'll end on this, and I'm sure that you can go into this so much more. The other very, very important concept in Islam is the issue of patience. Yeah. They are very patient. The Western culture, we live from election to election, right? Depends upon the government, and any government is 4 years. Muslim country is waiting for 1,000+ years in order to take over the world, and they will continue waiting, and little by little they will do what is necessary. And the Muslim culture is based on patience. Go see how many times the word patience is written in the Quran and in all the different contexts. And that is connected to the patience to overtaking the world in the name of Allah.
And the final word that you have to know is dimitude, because that drives everything. The condition that they want to return us back to in Israel that we are resisting is dimitude. Dimitude is the subjugation of the non-Muslim under Muslim rule. That's what they're looking to get back to. We were once dhimmis in Israel, no more. 70 years ago, Declaration of Independence, that said, it's over, boys. We are not taking your orders anymore. We're going to be sovereign. And it's that sovereignty, it's that act of sovereignty. It's not the specific land. It's not this side of Jerusalem or that side of Jerusalem. It's not Tel Aviv or Haifa or Jaffa. It's sovereignty for Jews in any part of this land. If we had the Tel Aviv Hilton, if that was the entire boundaries of the state of Israel,
they'd still want that.
They'd want that back.
Right. And then again, connecting this to Europe, they have the same perspective on Spain.
Correct.
Because according to Islam, once a land mass was under Islamic control, then the Muslims have to take over it again because it belongs to Islam.
Correct.
So they want Spain back.
And some of France, and some of the Balkans.
And the whole world. But there's two things. There's first, once was under the hand of Islam, has to be back under the hand of Muslim. So Spanish, you're a big target to be dhimmis, and then obviously the whole rest of Europe, because the whole world has to be dhimmis. Anyway, on that positive note, Brian of London, it is a pleasure talking to you of the basic facts of the reality of the world today that unfortunately so many people prefer to ignore, which again I call the cultural suicide of Western culture today. Hopefully we and Tommy are part of the rising tide to raise the awareness necessary for the masses to stand up and defend themselves, because unfortunately the governments are not, except for Israel and the United States under President Trump. But then you have others. You have India. You have those. You have the Eastern cultures that know Islam. China, right? So you have those cultures that no tolerance whatsoever for the Muslim culture. But you have the West that if it just continues, that's it. It's going to be Arabia.
Yeah.
On that positive note, Brian of London.
I'm Brian of London. Follow me, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. Just type Brian of London and you will find either a hair salon in Texas, ignore him, or me, Brian of London.
And if you just follow Avi Abelow anywhere, I think you will only find Avi Abelow. On that note, shalom from Jerusalem, everyone. Thanks for watching.